start with introductions. What I will do is just call on people, and if you could introduce yourselves and say who you represent, that way we will know who's joining us. So I'm Jenny Stapp. I'm the state librarian and chair of the Montana Land Information Advisory Council. Erin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is Erin Fashaway, and I am the state GIS coordinator with the Montana State Library.
Marlis?
Marlis Stark with the State Library.
Catherine?
Hi, this is Catherine Maynard. I'm the USDA NRCS representative on the council.
Great. Elena?
Good morning. I'm Elena Graham. I'm with the U.S. Forest Service in Great Falls, representing USDA.
Janet?
Yes, I'm Janet Cornish. I'm owner and principal of Community Development Services of Montana, and I'm a utilities or private business representative on the council.
Jenny Connolly?
I will be representing the Major Board today.
Great. Valentine?
I'm Valentine Hoff. I work at the Fire Center at the University of Montana, and I represent the Montana University System.
Dawn?
I'm Dawn Anderson with Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks, representing a state agency.
Eric? I don't know if you have a mic, Eric. You might be muted.
There. Now can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
I didn't think I was controlling my mute and unmute. I thought Erin had control of all that, so got it handled. Yeah, I'm Eric Spangenberg. I'm with Lewis Clark County, City of Helena, GIS. I'm representing local government.
Great. Frank?
Hi, I'm Frank Dewar, Gallatin County GIS Supervisor, and I'm a local government representative.
Molly?
Hi, this is Molly Hershey with Northwestern Energy, and I am representing GIS professionals.
Dan?
Hi, everyone. This is Dan Staley. I'm a professional land surveyor with Staley Engineering Associates. I'm our survey and GIS department technical lead, and I'm here on the council representing the Montana Association of Registered Land Surveyors.
Lee?
Lee Macholtz with the City of Missoula, and I'm a local government representative.
I think we have Mike Bosleman. It looks like he's just connecting. Have I missed any council members? I thought I could just go down my participants list, but even the participants list jumps around.
I do believe Rob All has jumped on.
Oh, hi, Rob. Yeah. Rob, do you want to introduce yourself? You're muted.
Unmute. Okay, sorry about that. Rob All here, representing the Montana Association of Geographic Information Professionals.
Great. It looks like Mike is still connecting. Any other council members that I missed? Michael, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Michael Fashway, Montana State Library, and the Land Information Lead.
And Troy.
Yeah, good morning. Troy Blanford, Water Information at the State Library. I'll be providing an update on LIDAR and elevation.
Great, thanks, Troy. Bill, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. My name is Bill Johnson. I'm with AppGeo, Applied Geographics. I'll be speaking a little bit later on the agenda about strategic planning. I spent the bulk of my career doing GIS work for the state of New York. I was New York's first geographic information officer and chaired our council there. So I'm back in some familiar territory and
We're glad
really
to have
happy
you,
to
Bill.
be here. Yeah, thank you.
Mike Bosselman, are you Transport DO3? Mike, if you are, we're not hearing you. At least I'm not hearing you.
That person isn't showing up as having any mic on the list.
Okay. Did I miss anyone?
I'm going to reach out to him on a text, Jenny, to see if that's him.
Sounds good. I assume it is, but I want to be sure. Well, again, thank you all for joining us in our second online meeting. We're continuing to meet in this format for the foreseeable future at the direction of both the governor as well as the State Library Commission. They're encouraging online meetings as opposed to face-to-face meetings whenever possible. And in light of that, and in light of Attorney General's directions, we're going to try to keep the agendas limited to important business at hand, allowing for as much participation in these meetings as possible given the current circumstances. There is a new agenda just posted along with some additional materials on the meeting site. The one addition was the addition of the MEGIP report under the standing reports. And then there's some additional documents available through your meeting materials as well.
Jenny, would you like me to share my screen?
Yeah, would you mind? That would be great.
Not at all.
Mike, it looks like you might have audio capabilities now. The one action item for this meeting was just approval of your April executive summary. We're going to postpone taking that action until your September meeting. This meeting, we needed to allow for more public notice of the meeting than occurred. And so given that that's the only action item, we're going to postpone that action and just move into the standing reports. And Aaron, if I don't know if Mike's available yet. So if not, would you go ahead and start with the GIS coordinators report?
I just realized I was muted. So for those of you that aren't using Zoom, as much as I use it, I still try to figure it out. If you have multiple screens, Jenny, if you do a gallery view, you can see everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, so that if you just, otherwise I think it will go to the shared screen and the people talking.
Exactly.
Yeah, so feel free to share your video if you would like. Okay, so to get started, I was really hoping Mike would be on for this. I have just basically a few things. Dan, I see that you're on, so that's good. To keep it brief, I'm going to start with the easiest things first. The Esri UC this year is, some of you have probably already heard about it through your networks. It is going to be free because of it's going to be virtual. Well, let me take a step back. It's going to be free for those entities that have an enterprise agreement and or good standing maintenance. And the council actually falls underneath our enterprise agreement. So what I would like to offer everyone, and we've offered it to other groups as well. So all state employees, first of all, for those of you that are working in state government, all state employees are eligible to attend the conference. And but I would like to also offer it to any council members that would like to attend. And the conference is it's in July. It's approaching, but there's obviously we don't have to worry about hotels, so there's plenty of time to get registered. It is going to be Monday, July 13th through Thursday the 16th. Pretty much all those pre-conference meetings, as far as I know, have been either postponed or canceled. There are pre-conference workshops that you can pay for and post-conference workshops that you can pay for, kind of like training. We certainly, we don't have a budget for that, but if you are interested in attending that the conference, I would encourage you all to do so. Now, given if you've ever been, you know it's a very huge conference. It's like 20,000 people, and it's a lot of content, a lot of really great content. I'm assuming it's going to be a little more limited with content. However, I've been working with our reps, our ESRI reps, to come up with a list of appropriate content for policymakers and folks in management. And so one example is we work regularly with the governor's office, and one of our representatives, Nancy Hall, is interested in attending this conference. Not everything is going to be relevant to her, so I'm going to try to point out some some of the workshops that would be, or tracks that would be relevant to her, and give her a few days of a handful of things here and there that she could attend. Now, a lot of you are heavy GIS users, or you have a background, so you'll probably be able to navigate this on your own. But I will provide that for those who would like a little assistance in how to attend the conference. But I think it's a really great opportunity. This is the first time it's ever been free, and given budgets and how expensive it is to get down to San Diego. It's held in San Diego every year. I would highly recommend that folks attend this conference. So I'll probably just follow up with an email, but you can always drop something in the chat box or send me an email if you are interested. And I know most of you that are using GIS software, you already know that you can go for free, but you know, you can definitely work with me if you're not in that boat. Okay, and then I guess the next thing is the RTN. Can everyone see my screen? I should have asked.
Yes, I can
Okay.
see it. Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. All right, I'm just gonna pull up the agenda. So for the past almost 2 years, the state of Montana has been working in cooperation with the state of Washington, and we've been reporting on this every so often throughout the years that this pilot project has been in place. And basically, it's been operating for free. We really appreciate everything that the state of Washington has done for us in leaving this pilot project up and running. Unfortunately, all pilot projects must come to an end, and it is going to be a quick end to this project. In MDT and the Montana State Library are working on trying to come up with an alternative solution to keep these the network running. We're not sure what it is going to, how it will affect the users currently. We're working on getting a snapshot of what that user community looks like right now from the state of Washington. If anyone has ever worked with Gavin Schrock, he's been very wonderful. He's been very supportive. He's one of the first people to stand up a real-time network in the US and possibly the world. They've hosted networks for Africa and communities in Africa. I'm trying to think of where else, all over the place. So they've been really great to coordinate with, but all free things must come to an end at some point. And so the Department of Transportation already has a research project in place to come up with a good methodology for how the business side will run for a real-time network. And now we're in the process of figuring out how to get it stood back up in in a fast amount of time so that people don't lose service that are counting on this network. A lot of the tribes are counting on this and have been using it. I do believe they've been using it on some of the actual MLI grants that they have received for FY 2020. So basically, what I'm here to report is that the pilot project is coming to an end on August 1st. It will affect users in Montana. We're trying to come up with a snapshot of what that looks like. And we are also trying to come up with an alternative solution so that people don't have a deficit in use of the network for a long period of time. However, there aren't any identified resources for it yet, and it is a pretty big task. So I do see that this network might be down for a few months, if not more. And like I said, as soon as we have more information from the Department of Transportation and some of the other folks that are working on this initiative, we will inform the community. Dan, I hope this is not a surprise to you.
No, it isn't.
Okay.
You know, I was just going to say that it's obviously the surveying community would be considered heavy users of this network. And then I was going to mention the tribes as well. So whatever Marls can do to get it back off center would be, we'll make sure we just reach out to the project coordinator and know that we'll support it in whatever way we can. It's a great project.
Yeah, thank you. We appreciate that. And I think that right now, what we're doing is researching what resources could be made available. You know, that I think the technology is pretty straightforward. You know, obviously it is costly. And then there's just the need for staffing to run the actual network. I think that we've got a good partnership with MDT, and you know, the push is towards moving to a coordinated effort where we would run and archive the information, run the network. They would handle the hardware and the surveying side of actually installing things in the field. That is a very broad, undocumented proposal right now that we're looking into, but as soon as we hear anything, we will inform the surveying community, the tribal community, the GIS mapping community, and other state agencies that are relying upon this network.
Any other questions for Aaron about the current pilot and its status or future plans?
Okay.
Was Mike able to join us?
No, I am not. I'm not hearing anything from him.
Just double check my communication too. Okay.
Okay.
Let's go ahead and move on, and we can come back to the grant review subcommittee if Mike's able to join us later on, and if not, Aaron, maybe you and some other members can cover that update. It is time to start thinking about the FY22 land plan and that planning process. I want to hold off a little bit on this discussion until we talk a little bit more about the MLIA strategic planning process later in the agenda, and at that time talk about how those two efforts might dovetail with one another to support both the FY22 land plan as well as future strategic planning. Jenny, I think next up is the MAGIP report, and Jenny is standing in for new MAGIP President Michael Kruger.
Good morning again. Yes, I am standing in as president today for Michael Kruger, who became president effective June 1. And he sent me a message, and I was jotting some notes, so I think we crossed over pretty much everything. The first thing that he had was that we would like to welcome our new board members that were elected. Jeff Hedstrom as vice president. Phoebe Ferguson was a newly elected member, and then Stephen Jay, who's been on the board to fill vacancies before, was elected as well, both to 2-year positions. We are holding a retreat, and it's the end of September. He asked me to mention the dates, but I don't have them in front of me at the moment. I think it's 27th and 28th or something like that. And that's going to be at Sealy Lake. And then we'll be working on our work plan and whatnot at that point. In the meantime, we are doing a virtual orientation for the new members due to the COVID. During the election, the proposed bylaws were passed, and the board did ratify those. So we'll be working under, going forward, we'll be working under the new bylaws. And then I also had on my list the conference status, and at this point in time, we are planning on having the conference again in April. It will be moved to a Tuesday, Friday rather than a Monday, Thursday, because it's the week of Easter for 2021. And again, it will be at the Holiday Inn in Missoula. They were very gracious about letting us postpone. And then the following year, the plan is to have in Bozeman, because we had already talked with the people here in Bozeman and had it kind of lined out to do that. So again, they were very gracious about letting us postpone for a year and reschedule. So are there any questions on any of that stuff?
I'm curious as to which hotel you're having at in Bozeman.
The Grand Tree.
Okay.
The only one
did they tear down, there was talk of them tearing down the Holiday Inn and
there
then
was
rebuilding?
talk of that. They have not done it yet.
Oh, okay.
Jenny, can you talk a little bit about the bylaw changes? These changes do include making the MLEAC board representative ex officio, is that correct?
That is correct. We talked about this when we were in the planning stages and rewriting the bylaws, and it was decided that, well, first of all, there was a question about whether or not that the MLEAC member had a vote when Catherine was appointed, and it was not clear in the bylaws the way they were written previously. So the effort was there to try to make that a little more clear. And there was no ill intent. There wasn't we weren't trying to take anything away from anybody, but it was decided that our members, our major members, don't have any say in how that person is chosen or anything. That technically they really don't even have to be a dues paying member in good standing or any of that. So that was kind of the decision that we went with based on those things.
Thanks for that update. Any questions for Jenny?
Well, this is Catherine Maynard. I just wanted to also add that I'm going to be stepping down as the council representative on NAGIP, and it would be great if you guys could appoint someone new before the retreat in September.
What are the dates on that again?
Let me get them for you.
Thank you.
You said the end of September. Thanks for bringing that change to our attention, Catherine. I think that gives us a good amount of time between now and the September council meeting to identify someone to fill that seat. I just want to reiterate how important I think the relationship between the Land Information Advisory Council and the Professional Association MEGIP is, and want to do everything that we can to keep open good lines of communication, making sure that our priorities complement one another and that we can continue to make sure that through that open communication we're able to further GIS in the state. You know, I respect MEGIP's decisions and why you came to those decisions. It did come as a little bit of a surprise to all of us when the bylaws were put out for a vote. You know, anything that we can do to make sure that MLEAC representation on that board is meaningful and productive, and as I said, our work complements one another. That's the kind of feedback and opportunity I'm looking to create.
I would agree 100%. Like I
Yeah,
said,
I guess just
we weren't
coming
trying to
from,
do anything to the relationship. We were just trying to clarify what it was, because it was pretty ambiguous the way it was written before. It was, when I first became president a year ago, or just a little over a year ago, it was very unclear about what that position looked like based on the bylaws, the way they were written. So we were just trying to clarify that, and it was unclear whether it was one person that was a rep from MAGIP to MLEAC and another person from MLEAC to MAGIP, or what that even looked like. So that was the intent, and I don't mean anything to damage any relationships or anything like that. I am very disappointed that Catherine feels that she needs to step down. I really did appreciate her input, her experience, and her time that she spent working with us on that.
Jenny, this is Dan Staley. I've been pretty heavily involved in our professional organization for a number of years on the board and serving as president and legislative and just kind of across the board. And so I can understand the struggle, particularly with updating bylaws and not only updating bylaws, but interpreting bylaws. The one piece of feedback I'd have for MEGIP is, you know, if my understanding is correct, so MILIAD appoints someone to the MEGIP board, and that person on the MEGIP board is a non-voting member of the board?
That's the way it reads now, yes.
Okay, gotcha. And so I guess my own just personal experience feedback is it's really hard to get people to serve on a volunteer board, especially if they don't have any say. You know, I mean, it's one thing to ask them to volunteer their time, and that's pretty, you know, in a professional society, that's pretty easy thing to do, but then not having a vote on the board, then it kind of gets tricky there. So you know, I mean, maybe if you can look at amending your bylaws again to just make sure that membership does vote that, you know, one person representing MILIAC be put on the board, but instead of MILIAC appointing that person, maybe membership votes that person just like everybody else, and maybe that's a good solution. But anyway, that's just kind of my feedback based on my experience with boards.
This is Janet. I'd like to add to what Dan just said, and that's the conundrum about people not necessarily being a member of MEGIP who are serving on MLEAC. Perhaps the appointee to the MEGIP board, if he or she is not a MEGIP member, the MLEAC could pay for that. In other words, by accepting that appointment, that person could become a member of MEGIP. I think most of us are members of MEGIP, but in the event that that wasn't the case, that could be joined. But I would agree with Dan, it's hard to get people to participate as just an ear without really having a vote. And so I, as a MEGIP member, as well as an MLEAC member, I would support a change to the bylaws, another change that would enable that person that representing MLEAC would have a vote.
I think that's a great suggestion,
Well, I
Janet.
guess I'd like to throw in an observation that's affected my decision to step down also, is that for all of us except for Jenny, our membership on the MLEAC Council is because of the agency that we're representing. We're on MLEAC to represent a particular agency, an entity, and appointing us to MEGIP board doesn't change the fact that that's the reason we're on MLEAC is for representation of our agency and not to, anticipate unnecessary problems, but there's always going to be then a potential for conflict of interest, and if not something dire, just the discomfort of it, of trying to understand, okay, who am I really? Now I'm on the council to represent my agency. Now the council is asking me to represent Jenny and the council on the MEGIP board, and especially then if you're a MEGIP member and you, in my case, for example, my MEGIP membership is independent of my employment. So my participation in MEGIP, it has to be on my own time. So it just, and it's certainly not that way for everyone, but short of it being Jenny herself, who else on the council has the ability to be completely independent and only represent the council in the interests of the council? So I just would throw that out for people to think about. I don't think there's an easy solution. And I know that the intent of having representation from MLEAC on the MEGIP board is all in the interest of communication and coordination. And so how best to facilitate that? It might even be that you go to the idea of a rotating participation, so that different members of the council can participate with MEGIP from time to time. I don't know what the right answer is, but I do know that I think it's worth whoever is asked to be that representative, that they have a real sense of ease about, okay, I'm on the council because of what agency I work for. Now I'm going to be on this MEGIP board to represent the council as a whole. And so that's just something I think deserves consideration.
Mm-hmm. I think that's a really fair point, Catherine. Other thoughts and comments?
One more quick thought I had is Catherine kind of brainstormed there. I'm thinking about Marls in the Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors. The Board of Professional Engineers and Land Surveyors is a governor-appointed position. They write the rules, the ARMs that govern our profession. None of them sit on the board of Marls, but all of them are invited to our quarterly meetings. And it's rare that we don't have at least 2 BPELS members that come to our meetings, and as well as our conferences. So that might be another thing to consider, is just taking that position completely off your board, but making sure the council is invited to all the events and meetings and well represented there. Just another thought.
Okay, this is Janet. I wanted to say I've been thinking a lot about what Catherine said just now, and I'm not volunteering myself because I'm not able to add this to my plate right now, but there's not all of us have that conflict of interest problem, particularly those of us that are in the independent or work for ourselves. But want to say that when conflicts arise, there's no reason why a board member can't excuse or recuse him or herself from a vote that might present an issue like that. I don't think that, while I think that those of you in Catherine's position, I think that's a legitimate concern that, you know, really who are you representing and on whose clock you're punching at the time, I think is a really important consideration. But if Emily Ack were to appoint someone, it would have to be from a field of people that didn't have those apparent conflicts. And I think there's enough of us on the Emily Ack board that don't fit that same conundrum that is very real for Catherine, but may not be for the case for several other of the members. So I think that we should be sensitive to that potential conflict and select someone who doesn't have that presented. But again, we all run into conflicts serving on boards, and recusing ourselves from a particular vote is not uncommon in this in the world we work in.
I would like to add that we are completely open to any discussion that anybody wants to have as far as bringing this back and amending the bylaws. But I was trying get them done in a year, which was a challenge, a very extreme challenge. They were posted in March, and we had definitely planned to talk about them in the after action, or the I think what's called at the end of the conference. There was going to be a whole session on it, which we of course weren't allowed to do because we didn't have a conference. So we did have a town hall meeting after the conference got canceled, and opened it up for questions and that sort of thing. And I apologize that the feelings happened that happened, but we are open to discussing doing an amendment back to the bylaws.
And Jenny, I don't certainly no need to apologize. I just want to make sure that we're furthering communication. And I think through this discussion, we've hit upon some potential challenges as well as some thoughts about how to address those challenges. And so I'm grateful to have that kind of chance. You know, I think to Dan and Janet's points, having someone who is fully able to participate just it makes that relationship most meaningful. I certainly respect Catherine's concerns. And I think we can talk about perhaps a process by which maybe what the council does is nominate a representative that is then on the ballot for elections or something like that. I think we would still want to try to address that particular concern that you mentioned, Jenny. I really like Janet's suggestion of paying that membership when necessary. I think that's a very appropriate response to that kind of concern. To address Catherine's concerns, one of the things I think would be important would be to look at MEGIP's work plan and the land plan, and to have a conversation about what those priorities are. And so as we are looking for volunteers or nominees to fill the MLIAC representation on the MEGIP board, we have an opportunity to potentially identify what some of those issues could be. Certainly not a perfect process, but at least have a chance for individual council members to weigh in and have an idea of where they may run into a conflict of interest should they choose to volunteer or be nominated for that kind of position. So I know elections typically occur in the spring, so maybe we can get on a cycle of having those kinds of discussions after the MEGIP work planning sessions and think about how we can improve that overall process.
I hear a lot of good ideas here. So
yeah, me too.
I would just like to add that that I think that, you know, a lot of hard work goes into updating those bylaws. So we definitely appreciate the cleanup that you guys have done, and that We might be partial, but we think that the elections went very well. Jeff Hedstrom is one of our analysts, and he was elected as vice president. So he was with the city of Great Falls, and so if you weren't aware of that, he now works on the CAT and CI projects. He came on board with us in November, and Stephen J is one of our past grant recipients, and he's presented to the council before. He works for Park County, and then Phoebe Ferguson, I do believe, she works for the Heritage Program. So congrats, we think you got a really great group in addition to all the other folks that are on board. So what I'm seeing now is September 16th is the next council meeting. Is that, if we have someone appointed at that next meeting, is that enough time for you folks before the orientation?
I'm sorry, I forgot to mention, I did look up, the dates are the 27th and 28th of September.
Okay. Is that enough time if we appoint someone on the 16th?
If you have somebody that wants to come to that board meeting, I would say let Michael Kruger know.
Okay.
So he can make arrangements for them for lodging and whatnot.
Okay. So we'll certainly accept any calls for volunteers, and we'll reach out to all the council members that weren't able to make it on the call today and work with them on getting a replacement for Catherine.
And Catherine, thank you for your service.
You're welcome. I didn't really do anything, but yeah, it was a good experience.
Has Mike been able, oh, sorry, Jenny, go ahead.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions for Jenny? Has Mike been able to join us? I don't see him.
I'm not hearing from him. He must be in a meeting.
Yeah. Let's go on then to the grant recipient report.
Okie dokie, let me pull up the documents. So this is very small text here, so I'm going to try to blow it up for everyone. Let me start with fiscal year 2019. So as most folks know, this is a very busy time of year at the end of a fiscal year. No matter when your fiscal year is, it always seems to be extremely hectic. And right now, I like to say that we live within 3 different grant years. I'm closing out FY 2019. We are either extending or closing out FY 2020, and then we are starting FY 2021. And so just to kind of go over the FY 2019 grants, we had a few that needed to re-extend right at the end to finish out some work. COVID's really put not only government employees and our grantees behind schedule, it's also put the contractors behind schedule as well. And so we saw an additional need for some extensions so that they could wrap up the projects. But we've got 2 that are currently closing. The data has been received and has been approved. Now we're just doing the final invoicing. And I just have one that's still, after a lot of communication, I'm still not hearing from. It's the town of Ennis. I do know, after working with Dan, because he was working on the project, or his company was, that they did do some work, and they've assisted in trying to reach out to the grantee as well. But I would consider that grant at risk right now of not being funded, because we have not received any communication from them or requests for funding reimbursement. But overall, the other grants I think turned out pretty well. We always see a lot of a lot of situations happen because, you know, when you have a person involved, personal things come up. You know, and we've seen project managers change over, people retire, and other folks kind of step up trying to figure out where they are in the process. And we saw that with not only I think one, but two of the grants. And so a lot of the grants this year were Next Gen 911, or this fiscal year, the 2019, were Next Gen 911 and infrastructure was the majority of them. And so we feel like this is really adding to the capacity at the local government level to use GIS and to manage their information regarding their city or county's assets and infrastructure. And then, of course, attributing to the statewide layers when it comes to the Next Gen 911 process. And then, you know, we've got one county that, I'm sorry, two counties that were working on the CAD and SDI. Those data sets have been submitted and won't be integrated into our statewide data set for another few months. But overall, I feel pretty good about the year. Still kind of hopeful with the town of Venice, and you know, I've got 6 days left, so we'll see if we hear back from them. And then following up with fiscal year 2020, we are extending, well, let's say 4 grantees have completed or are in the process of completing their grants. So we're extending 11. I guess I would say that was anticipated, given you know, the COVID response starting in March. Some of the tribes are just completely shut down, and that's really affected their ability to get work done. But we have been able to reach out to everyone and start the process or complete the process of amending their grants. Last year, we've just decided to amend for a full year instead of trying to do it for an anticipated 3-month time or whatever they define, and needing a second contract amendment. It just feels like it's a better administrative way to go about things. I think that some of these will be the extensions, even though it's for a year, they'll be wrapping up their projects in the fall, given they have the ability to. I'm pretty confident moving forward that this will be I've been in contact with everyone, and that this will be moving forward, we'll see a completion of all of the MLIA grants for the fiscal year 2020. And then I didn't put a report because you know, at the last meeting we had approved 11, I do believe it was 11 grants. It's in the meeting materials from last year and posted online. And we are just starting the process with that and creating those contracts and statements of work with the current grant recipients. So there's really nothing to report there. I anticipate that this next fiscal year will probably be a little unpredictable when it comes to COVID and being able to work with other folks, and it's really going to force the need to change the way some of their projects have been organized, and we'll try to reach out to these grant recipients and provide any kind of service that we can regarding, you know, how to manage a grant during this COVID time, and provide extra support if possible. But I'm feeling pretty confident about the 11 grants that are not listed here right now, but I can pull them up from last meeting's materials. So overall, I think we're doing really well. Mike is not, I can just give a grant review subcommittee report.
Why don't you go ahead?
Okay. I don't think Mike is going to make it. I did just get an email from him. So basically we had a debrief from the last application process two or 3 weeks ago, and the subcommittee gave me some really wonderful ideas about reaching out to past grant recipients, asking for feedback, what worked, what didn't work, how the process could be improved to help them. maybe reach out to folks to see, you know, we didn't see a ton of new applications this year, and maybe try to understand why that was the case. We also are going to continue to work on the grant benchmarks, and are going to schedule a meeting sometime, probably at the end of July, to discuss those grant benchmarks that Janet had created a memo, I think about a year ago, on grant benchmarks. So they're going to continue to do that work. They're also going to work to inform the land plan. And so what we had, one of our goals was to keep these committees, subcommittees working throughout the year, instead of taking a break and then forgetting everything that we did, and then also interacting with each other. I think we're on the right track for that. We've got a couple folks online who are a part of the subcommittee. I don't know if you wanted to say anything else regarding the grant review subcommittee.
Good here.
And one other thing to report is that for those of you that are familiar with the tools that the state offers when it comes to grant management and the grant application process, there was a tool called Web Grants, and it was a tool that we started to use, and through the application process, we actually did implement an application in that tool. In the meantime, the state ITSD had gone through the process and decided to do a state contract with a different web grant tool. And honestly, we were happy with what they had presented. It is definitely a more modern use of the tool, less heavy-handed on the administrative side, and we jumped at the opportunity. And it was definitely affordable for us. And so we are going to be switching tools from the Web Grants tool to a tool called Amplifund. And we are currently in the process of working on that, working on creating our app, pushing all the current grantees, the FY 2021, into that tool. Where one of the benefits of the tool is there'll be automated reminders to grant applicants. There'll be the ability for them to do reporting when it comes to their time reporting on how the project is going and what deliverables, where they're at in their in the process of achieving their defined goals and objectives. And then they'll be able to submit deliverables, they'll be able to submit invoices and do financial tracking through the system. So John Kilgour and I have been working on that along with a couple other folks from the office. And so we're really excited to jump into that, because we just think it'll be so much better and a more modern process of managing grants. So we're very excited to use that tool. The goal currently is to be ready to have grantees access and submit their first quarterly report, which would be due in October 10th of this year. And that's our current goal, is to have them in the system and reporting their first report of their grant. So we're pretty excited about that. I think it's a really positive move in the right direction for us.
Thanks, Erin. Questions for Erin about the grant program? Or any other questions or comments from subcommittee members?
I do have a question for Erin on going forward, with respect to the effect of COVID on the grants. I know you referred to it in the current grant recipients. Projects that incorporate any kind of public input, or where you want to be out, doing any outreach as part of a grant recipient's work. Is MLA, are we, or the library, helping communities with other ways in which to reach out to members of the public? In other words, using platforms like Zoom and other things to help our recipients do the outreach they need to do in light of the fact that we can't do as many public meetings and gatherings. I know that public component is part of every project, but many of them do have some public outreach.
Yeah.
Assist local communities in getting this work done in the context of the new normal.
Yeah, so we are, I think that's a fantastic idea. And we are in the process now of developing those statements of work. And so we will be sure to highlight any public engagement to make sure that it falls in line with the current, what I think it's the current governor's orders of the phases, and I'm sure they're going to change in the future, and we'll make sure that that's a great idea to put that into our language.
We do have state licenses for Zoom, for example, and in other work within the library are supporting local governments online meetings through that platform. And I think that's something that, as Erin said, we can definitely write into those statements of work to help facilitate.
Right, and universities have that license as well. So if there's a local college in the community, that's another point of contact for using online platforms for meetings.
Yeah, great point.
That's a great idea. I really appreciate that. I think the other thing is, I think the tool is really going to be helpful because it's going to be something that's just constantly pushing communications to them via email. And I think it's just email right now. I don't know if they can receive other types of communication. But I think that'll be really important. And each individual grantee can actually do more and use it as a management system for their own, so they can put in additional, we'll have our requirements of how they need to manage that grant, but they can even go above and beyond and do additional tracking, kind of like in the training that you've done in the past, that instead of having a notebook with all the notes, they'll be able to have, their virtual notebook and use the system to kind of go above and beyond what we're asking. So I think it'll be a really great tool for them. Eventually, and it might be part of the July discussion or possibly the discussion in the September or perhaps November meeting, is I think the one thing I'm really we are constantly kind of bumping into is the project management of the grants themselves. And we've always seen when we've offered a training, we see a positive effect. And so I think that, and this is a perfect partnership with MAGIP, perhaps at the April meeting is doing some sort of, we've done training on how to write a grant. Now I think we should do training on how to be a grantee and manage that grant. I think that we could go above and beyond. I think that we had a section of our grant training, grant writing training that touched on grant management, but I think we could go even further on and perhaps do a day-long seminar on how to be a good grantee, and in our eyes, in how it works for the MLIA grant program, but then just overall in general, how to manage a grant that you have received. So I think that training is needed, and I think partnering with MAGIP could be a really great way to deliver that type of training.
Other discussion? All right. Let's move on to the COVID special report, Erin.
Okay, so basically I just wanted to brief everyone on the work that we're continuing to do for the state in COVID response. And so we are continuing, there's a team of us that are working on the updates, and you guys are probably very familiar with this dashboard now. Some of the things we've probably seen since the last time we met was we have an active cases map. So given time, the cumulative cases is good, but it doesn't really make sense. And, we wanted to show something that was more real to the time at hand. We are in almost month 3.5 now. So we've put out this active cases map. This takes a lot of work. Initially, it took a lot of work, and I just wanted to tell everyone that who's working behind it. So it is the State Library, it is DES and Department of Administration's ITSD, and also the Department of Health. And we're all partnering on this together to make sure we're presenting the most up-to-date, accurate counts that we know of at the time. The data is available. It is on the GIS data list. I know a lot of counties have tapped into that, and they are using that for delivering their own type of communication outside of the county information that they receive. I know Flathead County is using it. I do believe this city of Bozeman is using it. I think Lewis and Clark County is using it. So we're happy to be able to provide that information to the folks. One thing I heard at the national level through my work with NSGIC is that the CDC had partnered with health departments, state health departments, to deliver services to further enhance their dashboards or maps to communicate to citizens about the status of COVID in their state. And although it was 3 months after we had already launched this, we're taking the opportunity to use that partnership and the contract that was put in place between the CDC and Esri. And we have a meeting this week to further our dashboard. There are some things we know will need to be added to it. We're considering, the flu season and a whole bunch of other testing data, measuring testing over time, how we're going to present the testing. We're working on the national level. Yesterday there was a what's called a hot wash. For those of you that are have worked in the emergency services or military in the past, you've probably be familiar with that term. I had to ask what it was. It's basically a debriefing of the situation. And so there was a hot wash done, and it was done by NAPSIG and NSGIC and a couple other organizations, and basically discussing the status of how communities, local communities, counties, and also at the state level, how they were reacting to the response and the technology that they were using, and how could they improve the processes, and just basically trying to learn from everyone in a very short period of time. It was only an hour and a half, but I thought it was useful to attend. And the other thing that they did was they had a service where there was live voting being done the whole time. I do believe this is going to be recorded, so if I can get that, I'll send it to everyone, because I thought it was well done, and I liked the live voting to get feedback on the questions from the audience. And there was probably, I don't know, 75 people online, if not more. And so we're going to continue to promote the use of the technology in the response to COVID itself. And then also, I'm happy to report that DES has announced they went out for to try to hire a GIS person before this started, and unfortunately they did not find anyone through that process. They have re-announced, and they're back on board with trying to get someone hired. They are all in when it comes to GIS now. I'm very excited. It's nice to see an agency integrate GIS. If you remember, probably, oh gosh, I can't remember, 8 years ago, and when I first came to the state, I worked with DES quite a bit in response to 9/11 and some of the Patriot Act money that had come in, and for critical infrastructure mapping. And over time, they did not, they lost their GIS analyst, and they weren't actively doing any mapping. And so to see that come to fruition and adopt the technology and be full-fledged and ready to dive in, it's very exciting. And so we're really happy to be able to help them in the interim. So I think you can be looking forward to seeing new things and addressing COVID as it comes. When we do any work, it's always with the governor's task force. They're pretty much working with the DES and giving direction on how we need to be moving forward. I think you can see across a lot of different professions, not only just state government and health departments reporting this type of information. You see the adoption and use of other technology, and the state library, of course, is not new to that. And there was a dashboard created when we first went out with this dashboard, very similar to this one, reporting the status of libraries. Now we have a new dashboard, and it is just quite lovely, and I'm going to pull it up. And so we've implemented technology across the agency, which is what we're trying to encourage most state agencies to do. And it's a very nice interactive dashboard. And I gave a little guidance, but it was not done by GIS professionals. So you can tell that really that the technology is moving into a direction where anyone can use it, as long as you have those base data layers available. That's kind of the point of the MSDI and the MLIA. And so they're able to take the information. They have access to all state agencies have access to the enterprise agreement, so they can use the technology that way to integrate GIS into their workflow. So we're really proud of the work that's been done here. We've also seen it done in new and creative ways. Department of Justice, when they were sending all of their employees home, they created a dashboard. It's definitely not public, but they were tracking the use of their assets and where their computers were going for their employees. I thought that was a really neat way to use a dashboard to keep track of things, not knowing where their employees might have been or where they were going to be working from at the time. And it was just a clean way to present that. When you have, I don't know, $50,000 worth of laptops walk out your building, you're going to want to know where they are. And so that was a really great way to communicate that to management. And that was something that Bob Cochran with the Department of Justice, he's their GIS manager, was working on. So I encourage you to look around and, explore some of these dashboards. They're really well done. Through the MAGIP community, there was some discussion on the Bozeman website. They implemented Hub, and they have a really great snapshot, the city of Bozeman, on the work that they've done and kind of like the economic and business metrics for the Tri-County area, which is Park, Missoula, and Gallatin. And I thought that was really well done, kind of showing how COVID is affecting that region. And then I've seen some just other really slick, beautiful dashboards out there for Flathead County, and I apologize, Frank, I can't remember if you guys, I'm pretty sure you have one up. I know Park County has one up. I know Lewis and Clark County has one up. And so it's just GIS has been at the forefront, and I think it's very exciting, and we're really excited to see all the work that's being done. And then in addition to that, given that we have kind of been on the forefront, the state library made it to ArcUser magazine, in the GIO from Maryland. Her name is, Julie, and I'm forgetting her last name right now. It's in the article, but we had been on a podcast in March, the State Scoop podcast, addressing how the states were meeting the needs of the COVID response. And we actually made the ArcUser magazine, both the digital version and the print version, and I went to the office to check. So we're pretty proud of this. I would say it's an international magazine to get the coverage. I think it's really great for our states and any kind of efforts we have moving forward legislatively. That is all I have to say, which was quite a bit.
Great update. Question?
Hey, Aaron.
Go ahead, Dan.
This is Dan. And this is kind of off topic a little bit, so maybe should be part of a different discussion. But regarding dashboards and critical infrastructure, I've seen from the private sector that's involved in design and construction of critical infrastructure, I've seen community needs for dashboards, communities being counties and towns, in tracking their critical infrastructure. Is there an avenue for training there, maybe through MAGIP, to where some of these dashboards that have been successfully set up can be presented and just kind of a Q&A session?
Yeah, I think that's a wonderful idea. And I think it could be something we try to integrate into the land plan, and also something we definitely can partner with MAGIP on. If there is a need, and and maybe we need to take a different approach to future grants, and and we haven't implemented these types of technology solutions, saying you should consider doing this type of dashboard for your community. That is definitely something that we could discuss as part of the land plan process. But in the meantime, we definitely could partner with MAGIP to bring that type of training to life.
I think there'd be a lot of interest there. Particularly over on the DES, the local DES side of things,
yeah.
As well as the economic development and community impact plans. I think that the dashboard way to present that data is just unparalleled. It's just really useful.
And if I'm going to go way out on a limb here. We were talking about how we could do something in the fall as far as MAGIP, so that, we can still provide some kind of services to our membership and that sort of thing, since we didn't have the conference this year. But of course, a fall tech session or something like that wouldn't have worked. But this might be something that we could do in the fall, so that it would be sooner rather than later. And I'll bring it to the board and see what they think.
Excellent. Thank you.
Jenny.
Yeah, please keep us in the loop, Jenny, because I think that we could partner here, and I could also bring DES in, because they provide the leadership aspect over all the local disaster and emergency service coordinators. And we have had quite a few DES folks at the local level that have been grant recipients, so it fits in well with what we're already working on.
Okay, let me bring it up and see what we can do.
Excellent. Other discussion? All right. How are folks doing? Does anybody need to take a short break? I know online meetings can get long.
I could use 5.
I could.
Okay, it's 11:17. Let's come back at 11:30.
Thank you.
Great. Encourage you to mute yourselves. We'll leave the meeting running. Joining us again. Next on the agenda is an update from Troy on the elevation theme and the LiDAR application. So Troy, thanks for joining us.
Try to share my screen again here. I should have just left it up. Good morning to everyone. So I think I last presented to the council a year ago in June, at least for an elevation update. And at that time, we were seeking council's approval of the Montana LiDAR plan. So today I was going to give an update on the acquisition status of LiDAR for the state, and then also get into another role for the library is to make all this data available, and that's within the LiDAR plan too, for the state library to become a repository. So I just wanted to cover a few of those things with you today. So I've gone over this story map before with everyone. This is the main way for anyone to get to LiDAR data for the state. You see the link to the LiDAR plan down there at the bottom. But I wanted to start here with the status of LiDAR statewide. Remember, that's the goal of the state LiDAR plan, is to complete LiDAR for the state by 2023, started 2024, somewhere in that time frame. So what we're looking at here is all the green is what's completed. These are projects that have been flown, the data is available, and we have most of that data here at the library already. The different shades of blue, that's data that's in progress. So that slightly darker shade is LiDAR that's been flown, and now it's going through the processing phase with the vendor. So it hasn't yet been delivered to anyone, but it's been flown, and it's being processing. And then that lighter blue is where there's active acquisitions going on right now and continuing into the summer. So we applied for a grant back in, I guess it was May of last year, through the USGS 3DEP program. That's the 3D elevation program. That's a cost sharing program through USGS to work with partners to fund LiDAR acquisitions. Those flights are going on right now. So if you're seeing my cursor, Ravalli and Granite are being collected. We've also got projects through Gallatin for the Forest Service that are going to be collected, and then a small one up here in Lincoln County. These other two blue ones are being led by the DNRC through FEMA. They received some grant funding through FEMA for flood risk mapping, and they've been collecting Lincoln County. And then basically right now there's flights going on to acquire parts of Cascade and most of Teton County. So that's the update on where LiDAR is going on right now. I've got some numbers for you. So completed, so that's the green stuff. That's about 33,000 square miles, so roughly 25% of the state. The blue is roughly 29,000 square miles. That's 20% of the state. And then planned, we've got another 10% there, so about 20,000 square miles. So this time next year or next fall, we should be sitting at about 55% of the state complete. So some tremendous progress has been made. I think when the LiDAR plan was written last June, the status for Montana was just under 30%. So to be at 55% now a year later is pretty awesome. So that's the status. I did mention, I wanted to mention these few yellow areas across the northern tier of the state. If you're seeing my cursor, so the tribal areas, and then Glacier County and Fergus County. This was our most recent BAA 3DEP cost share award. That award was for 11,000 square miles, roughly $3.5 million for that area. So that's coming up this fall is when those areas are going to be collected. The partners on that, we got each of the tribes were involved. They brought in a significant amount of money. The NRCS, Montana NRCS, continues to be a fantastic partner on this, bringing in dollars towards these acquisitions. And then also the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service was interested in the Charles Russell, so they came involved for this area. And then Glacier National Park was interested in the east side of their boundary, so they came in as a partner. This last year we had roughly $900,000 in partner funds, and then USGS chipped in with the other 2.5 million. So if we show an effort here and we're bringing in cost share and funding from the state, the USGS has been very willing to partner with us and make some very significant contributions to statewide LiDAR. So I think the main thing Aaron invited me to talk about today is the LiDAR application that we're working on. So right now, to get data, everything's going through request only. So we've got 2 staff here at the library that are taking care of those requests. Anyone looking for the data comes in and fills out this form and submits it to us, and then we've got staff watching for those and taking care of the requests. I just wanted to show a bit about what's going on with requests. So we've had 253 requests over the last year. We first started taking requests in June. You can see that now that we're sitting right around 1 a day. So each dot there is a month. So we're getting about a request a day. So it continues to grow here. This is an internal application that we have for tracking requests. So you can see where requests for data are being made. You see they're throughout the state with the cluster here kind of in the western side of the state. That's probably due because those are our most recent collections that have been made available. So as data first becomes available, we get a significant number of requests right off the bat. This little chart here is we're tracking use. Like we want to know how this data is being used. For a long time, the flood risk management was kind of leading the LiDAR acquisitions through DNRC and FEMA. So we've known that flood management has been a big use of LiDAR, but what we're finding through these additional, by tracking these requests, is look at all these other uses out there that are coming in, you know, quite comparable to the flood risk management requests. So we're learning some things about how this data is used in just a wide variety of uses out there. So that's right now requests are, getting the data is request only. We are working on this application that I'm about to demo now that allow people to view, download, and request data. So I got this screen up just to show you how this is going to be integrated into what the public sees. So here's my story map. I'm in development mode right now. You can see that I've got this tab, view, download, request data, grayed out. So it's not active yet. The public's not seeing that. But once we switch it out, it's going to replace this tab. So people will come to view, download, and request data. And I'm just going to switch views here so it's full screen. So the first thing that pops up here is the splash screen with the disclaimer. We recognize USDA Montana Natural Resource Conservation Service here. They have provided seed funding for the development of this application. And as I mentioned, they continue to be a great partner. One of the first things with making the data available to view or download is we wanted to continue to maintain being able to collect use information. So we've got this data use survey here, and we're not requiring it, but we're strongly encouraging it. We want anyone coming in here and using the app, downloading data, viewing data, to submit one of these data use surveys. So it just asks, what are you using the application for downloading or viewing data, business sector, where are you interested, what's the use category, and then just general description of how you're using the data. So we want to, when we flip over to this application, we want to make sure we continue to capture that use information because it is proving so valuable for planning LiDAR acquisitions and working with the USGS on what the state needs the data for. So once I've filled out the survey, I can get into the actual application. And the first thing you see here on the left side are just a series of filters. And those are intended as a really quick way to subset the data to exactly what you are looking for. So most people coming in here are going to be looking for data that they can view online or either download. So that filter's checked here. So we're seeing only those projects that are available already for online viewing or that are downloadable. So I wanted to go through here what types of data are in here. So we're providing the core products from LiDAR, and what we consider to be those core products are the bare earth digital elevation model, the surface model, intensity, aspect, slope, and we'll look at those. I wanted to, maybe we'll look at Red Lodge here. That's, this is our most recent data. So I'll just enter Red Lodge up here and jump to Red Lodge. So what we're seeing here turned on now, you can see it's the top layer is the bare earth digital elevation model. So this is the bare ground. So trees, buildings, everything is stripped off. So you're getting that measurement of the ground measurement. Under that is the surface model. So here now we're seeing the buildings, we're seeing the trees, we're seeing everything on the surface. If there's to be a road here. But you're even seeing cars that happen to be passing by at the time, things like that. So just one really simple use of this is just a demonstration here is maybe we want to find the height of this tree. So I can turn both these layers on, click on that location. So the surface model, so that's including the tree, is 5598 feet. And the bare earth is 5562. So quick math there, 556. So that is about a 40-foot tree. Pretty awesome. Now that those values are the vertical accuracy of those things is in the 6-inch range. That's just phenomenal. We compare that to what's available right now. So that's this statewide layer. These values range, you see, you get pretty much no detail there. The accuracy of those values is more a matter of a couple meters. So we're going from an accuracy in the range of meters to an accuracy of a matter of inches. So I want to show a few other products. So we're looking now at intensity. So this is the strength of the LiDAR signal returning to the sensor. You see that like these bright white ones are probably all buildings with metal rooftops. So that energy just bounces directly back, versus water is going to absorb a lot of that energy. So it comes back very dark. These intensity images I see value in these for the hydrography theme, because as you can see, water shows up very dark in color. So it's another way for us to derive hydrography and streams from it, amongst many other uses. We've got slope and aspect in here. Here's a look at slope. And then also interesting, we're able to generate, these are machine generated contours. They're generated on the fly, but we've got 2-foot contours in here. And we've also got 1-foot contours in here. So 1-foot and 2-foot contours. Looks like I froze up. I think my screen froze up on me, but I really didn't have too much more that I actually wanted to show. I did want to go through a bit on how you download data, and if my screen comes back, I demo that. But when it first comes up, you see all the project areas, and it's just using a pop-up. So if you just click on one of the projects, you'll see within that info box the download link. We're providing downloads in 2 different ways. You can download an entire project. So you could download like a Bare Earth DM for an entire county. And then we're also providing the downloads by quadrangle, so USGS 24K quadrangle. So the project-wide downloads, those are going to be in the 10 gigabyte range or more. So that's a huge download. It's going to take a couple hours. We've done a lot of testing with that. It's been working. It's been fine. What we're telling people is, yeah, it's a long time to wait for that download, but it's better than sending a drive and waiting for the mail. So we think it's realistic. But that's also why we're providing the quadrangle downloads. Those quadrangles are more in the 1 to 2 gigabyte download range. And with the high-speed internet, you're going to be able to pull something like that down in 30 minutes or less. So you saw with what's downloadable so far, there's still a lot that's request only. And so if you're still seeing my screen, at the top there, you see a link there, submit a request for LiDAR, not available by download. And that'll jump to that same survey that we've been using. So it's kind of a mix right now. We'll be adding more and more data in here, making it more and more available for download. Our general strategy for that is working from most recent projects backwards. So we've got all of 2018, all of 2019 data in there, and we're going to be working backwards to some of that older data.
I'd like to just throw in some kudos for Troy and his team. When we started getting larger LiDAR acquisitions for Montana, we in the NRCS were really struggling with how do we make this available beyond just our own staff. And of course, there was other entities like the state DNRC that were doing some large collections that we wanted access to. So with the limited amount of funding that we had available, Troy and his folks really went to work in an amazing fashion to design these products, both the inventory story map and now this data download application. And I just see it as being a tremendous benefit to all of the state partners and, both public and private. But one thing I would have to say is that the NRCS has had a limited amount of funding to help this get going, and what we've called seed money. But it is important for the council and all others who are interested in this to really start thinking about how this effort is going to have long-term funding. And it's one thing to fund the actual data acquisitions, But then there's all of this other behind the scenes work that needs to be done to make that data available and uh, keep it alive and well, so to speak. So at some point, I really think the council could play an important role in addressing some of that need. Um, but again, just thanks so much to Troy. The folks at the library are just phenomenal in their skills and their collaborative efforts with the different talents that they have on the staff. And we at least the NRCS and all of the folks that we serve, farmers and ranchers and engineers and you name it, are just deeply appreciative of all of this work.
Yeah, thanks, Catherine.
Thanks, Catherine.
My screen came back there. I just wanted to show quickly these. So here's the project download link. And then we can also bring up the project report. You get a nice report on the accuracy of the data, how it was collected, the control that was set, all that sort of stuff is just readily available right there within the viewer. That's all I really had. The last little plug I wanted to make is that we do have an elevation working group meeting coming up on July 22nd at 10. That meeting is all about planning the next LiDAR acquisitions. So we're looking at as many partners as possible to tell us where LiDAR is needed, who might have funding available, and then based on that information, we look at applying once again for a USGS 3DEP grant in the fall for acquisitions the following year. Happy to take any questions or comments, or that was it for my demo.
Thanks, Troy. Truly fantastic if you think that we just presented the LiDAR plan a year ago, how much has been accomplished. So congratulations and thanks for all of your really hard work. Any questions or discussion from the council?
I would just encourage everyone to attend, if you're interested in the status of statewide LiDAR for Montana, to attend the working group meeting and then work within your respective communities to help us find new partnerships. This is definitely something that not one agency can take the burden of. Obviously, there's not a lot of resources at the library side to purchase new data. We certainly are helping manage and coordinate the acquisition, but we are constantly, in search of new partnerships, and it's imperative to go from the 55% to a full 100. And so, you can contact myself, you can contact Troy. We are willing and able to start taking new partnerships today.
Kind of along those lines, I just kind of throw out an idea, you know how I am. The wheels start spinning on this kind of stuff, and I got to throw out ideas. But there's a current fiscal year 21 grant project where they're going to fly. It's up at Big Sky, and they're going to fly for photogrammetry. And I just have to wonder how many projects there are like that where if they wrote into the work plan to also include LiDAR data, if we could start chipping away at small sectors of this is a much smaller sector than most of the shapes on the map, but I just got to wonder out loud how many smaller projects there are like that, and this one's got state grant funding attached to it, that we could kind of partner with those smaller projects to acquire additional data.
Troy, you want me to?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
We talked about it some.
Yeah, so we definitely were all over that one, and we worked with the vendor to see if it was a possibility to get it flown which is, I think it's taking place this fall. I can't remember. The timing wasn't going to work out for this grant, but that doesn't mean we still can't work with the with the water and sewer district to try to see how much it would be to acquire an additional, you know, to add on LiDAR to the project. It is quite small though. And the one thing that we've, it's a quite small geographic area. The one thing we are leaning towards is trying to go to the more larger project areas to include counties. Certainly, I mean, we're kind of left with in the position of you know, the money that we have is the money we have. So if it has to work out in smaller projects, we're certainly not going to necessarily turn those away, but we're going to try to go after projects that are county or regional in nature, larger in nature.
Yeah, we had a similar situation last year with the Nature Conservancy. They were collecting a small area for Ruby Reservoir, and they were interested in working with us and had funding. But ultimately came down to they need to spend the money and they need that data quickly. So like through the state planning and working through USGS to try to leverage whatever grant funding they have, we're really looking at a year and a half before we can get that data back to us. So with a lot of these smaller projects, the timing just doesn't end up working out, and that's kind of similar to what we're seeing again with Big Sky. You know, that said, it's still valuable if we can find some of these smaller partners and smaller projects that can work with us, because we can take, you know, $10,000 or $15,000 or something like that and leverage that through the 3DEP program to, you know, increase it to 100,000 or something like that. So, but we are looking for all those types of partnerships, and it's just a matter if the timing of when the data is needed will work out or not.
Other questions or discussion? I wanted to just quickly address Catherine's comments about the ongoing funding. That's certainly something that's on our minds. We have built into our budget and our budget request for the next biennium funding that will pay for the ongoing storage of the collection of LiDAR data as it continues to grow, both the raw data as well as the derivative data sets that are generated from it. So that's something that's moving forward. And then I'll talk in a little while about the ongoing study looking at state library funding. And certainly through that effort, we've been arguing for additional funding based on the need that we're seeing to support the kind of application that Troy is demonstrating. So we're hearing good positive support continuing from the legislature towards that end. And we'll talk about that in a little while. All right, thanks, Troy. Great work.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda is the update on differential privacy, and the letter is shared in your meeting materials. Aaron, you're muted.
Aaron, you're still muted.
Okay, there we go. I heard that I was muted and then I hit mute, but clearly not well enough. So I reached out to Mary Craigle. She said that she did have an update. She is going to be giving a presentation to the epidemiologists on the effects of differential privacy with the work that they do, epidemiologists with the Department of Health and Human Services, next week. Unfortunately, she was not able to make this meeting. I think it would be great to get an update from her as the council. If we cannot if it's too late to do it in September, I can schedule a special webinar or some sort of working group meeting where we can discuss things further. I wanted to share with you the letter that NSGIC did send to the Census Bureau regarding the states and their local communities' concerns on the implementation of their new methodology on differential privacy. What I did hear, NSGIC had their summer caucus this last week, and one of the updates we did receive from Jenna Levier. She is the state coordinator or cartographer. I can't remember what her exact position is, but my colleague in Arizona, and she had a positive response saying that they were addressing the concerns that that state demographers and coordinators and GIOs and other communities that rely heavily upon this information that were expressing, and they were looking into modifying their current methodology to, I guess, perhaps alleviate some of the negative effects that were being discovered when they were implementing this new differential privacy. So right now, they're looking into it, which I think is good. They're addressing the concerns of the states, which is even better. And we hope to have a better, more technical, in-depth update from Mary Craigle sometime in the next few weeks. So we're monitoring this as it goes. Obviously, because of COVID, it's put this behind schedule as well. There was a delay in the actual census. I know the census count is down significantly. So if you could work within your communities to promote the census, please do so. I know that the advertisements are still all over social media that I've seen, and television and radio. So that's some of the, I guess I just wanted to give you a brief status of what was going on and what we were seeing thus far. Are there any questions? Okay.
Right. Next on the agenda is a discussion about the remaining unbudgeted funds that we have for the FY21 land plan. If you'll recall, when the council adopted the land plan late last fall, early winter, there was an amount of funding that we hadn't yet determined exactly how we were going to spend. And then in addition to that, we had some underspend due to the lower response rate to the grant applications. So right now there's around $100,000 for us to talk about how we would prioritize spending in this upcoming fiscal year. And some of the things that we've talked about, we'll discuss our work on a strategic plan here shortly. And then other things that the council has talked about are some needs for really a complete refresh of our transportation framework. There's been discussion about ongoing support for LIDAR, as well as other potential funding opportunities. Erin, I'll let you jump in.
Sure. Definitely unmuted. Okay. So some of the things we were thinking about in regards to transportation is doing a strategic review of the transportation framework layer, taking a look at the current layer, the business needs, working with the Department of Transportation and of course local governments on what that new version could look like, taking a look at current standards. Obviously, the next gen 911 standards are are pretty important, and that's the theme, or that's the standard we've been moving towards in response to addresses and the transportation layer. So taking a look at that, seeing how we can improve it, and then the workflows related to receiving the information from local governments and then pushing that up to federal layers. So really honing in on that process. Some of the things we've talked about in regards to the elevation working group, or excuse me, the elevation layer, is methods for improving some of the data products that we have. Not all of the current layers have, or the current flights have products such as contours or building footprints. That's something else we're exploring so that we can ensure that we have statewide layers when it comes to these products that are derived from the LiDAR data collections. And looking at my notes here. Another thing is the imagery for the fiscal year 2019. Right now, it is not, we just received it. We are working on the county mosaics. It is not a complete layer because of smoke and snow again this year. This is the third collection in a row. And we want to use the funding to prioritize the getting that out into a web service. We're working on that. And also not only the fiscal year or the 2019 strike fiscal year from that note, the 2019 NAEP, but also the 2017 NAEP, again, not flown completely because of snow and smoke. We have the basically the infill from what was flown in 2018 that is still missing from their services. So we wanted to make sure that that was integrated in to one statewide layer. And then again, with the, I do believe, and I'd have to, I did not check with Catherine beforehand. Catherine, sorry to put you on the spot, but I think the 2019 gaps are going to be flown this summer. And so making sure that that 2019 layer is a complete layer eventually when we receive all the information. So imagery is another high priority for us. And then finally, working on the way that we publish and communicate our information. We're looking into using the hub technology for the MLIA and other data sets that we have and other initiatives that we have. So we've purchased that software, and we're going to be working on exploring how to use that technology efficiently to promote the data sets that we have and the different collections that we have. So those are some of the things that we are working on currently. The one thing I wanted to touch on, maybe we'll take a pause and discuss those things before we touch on the council budget. Catherine,
has there been any discussion about additional funding for the land cover?
Catherine, it's my hope that the land cover work group can maybe do a presentation to the council in September, so we have some ideas of what that group is recommending for priorities for funding.
Yes, there will be a presentation scheduled for the September meeting. And I guess I'm hoping that the final decision on these funds might be postponed until they have a chance to present the funding needs.
I think at this point we're not planning to pin down the exact dollar amounts for any one of these initiatives. So at this point there could be some flexibility in the budget, and at a minimum, if we're not talking about FY21 dollars, making sure that the recommendations of the land cover work group get reflected in the FY22 land plan.
Sounds good.
Looking forward to that presentation.
Also, Erin, the gaps in the NAEP have been contracted, so they are going to be flown.
Wonderful. Thank you.
This is Ken Wall. I've got a question. Do you have any idea, Jenny or Aaron, of the governor's budget from the pandemic, the 1.25 billion priorities, how those fit in with any of these efforts? I mean, I'm not sure if they have been made public or not, but or what they're considering, but I just wonder how that might fit in with some of these priorities, or could be leveraged.
Ken, there have been some calls for groups to submit requests for funding. That's a relatively small amount of the overall funding that's available. I do know that until the feds have decided exactly to what degree some of those dollars can be used to backfill lost revenue, there's not a lot of planning going on until some of those kinds of questions have been answered. At that point, we should hear more about how the governor would hope to see these dollars used. So top priorities right now are shoring up revenue for local governments, including cities and counties, and then understanding from the federal government to the extent to which the state can use those dollars to make up for lost revenue.
I do know that the state of Wyoming reached out to us to try to understand what it costs to build our structures layer, because they were going to go after COVID funding to fill that that layer, to complete that layer for the state of Wyoming. I'm not sure where they're at in that process. I was given some guidance from the former health GIO from the state of Nebraska, saying to be prepared for federal distribution of funds in response to COVID and for GIS types of grants, and to just be ready, because that it will come fast from his experiences with similar situations like this, or just disasters in the past. And so through NISJIC, we've been kind of waiting and listening and seeing what's available. That's how we were able to figure out that there was a contract in place with the state epidemiologists and state health departments and ESRI to do further expansion or creation of COVID dashboards. I think that, through NISJIC and other national communities, will continue to monitor the situation to see what else might be available. I could see for testing purposes that addresses and structures, or structures and addresses and transportation would be extremely important information to have.
Yeah, there's probably a tie-in. There's definitely a tie-in with that, and possibly with LiDAR as well, and just being sort of positioned, I think is critical as this plays out. There's also a lot of local interest here in Missoula, for increased looking at broadband since the COVID, because of the increased use of it, et cetera. And the library's done a lot of work on that in relation to providing hotspots in at-risk populations, things like that. But I think there's particularly the national address database, because at the recent NISJIC meeting, there was some discussion of things like building footprints being considered personally identifiable information. And NISJIC has always really been strong at trying to maintain civic addresses as being public data, not confidential data. So but it's a real key data set, I think, and ties in with a lot of our MSDI framework work.
Other discussion about funding priorities?
So this is Dan. Just to make sure I'm understanding the chart on our screen, the unallocated council decision of $30,000, is that what we had discussed at a previous meeting, where we kind of had 5 possible and we narrowed it down to transportation and elevation data? Okay. And then the Miliac grant total allocated funds is 250,000. This fiscal year, we didn't have that much. And so can that be added to the unallocated council decision figure? Has it already been added, or is that?
That's exactly right, Dan. So
Okay.
there's somewhere around between 100 and 120,000, depending on where we come out at the end of this fiscal year, and remaining dollars there.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
Exactly right. Yep.
Okay.
Discussion.
So the other piece of this that we wanted to talk about was the council budget, which has been set at $10,000 for the past few years. Given that they'll, most travel has been canceled, and conferences themselves have been canceled for the rest of this current calendar year, and not knowing when we'll have another meeting in person, and basically this council budget covers those types of costs. We usually try to send one council member to the NISJIC conference. We cover MEGIP conference costs, travel to our meetings and per diem and things like that. So this year, given that no one will be attending the conference in New Orleans, the NISJIC annual conference, it is going virtual. They haven't put a call out there yet explaining that. I think the website still says it's in New Orleans, but it is going to go virtual. I do believe it's going to be kept at the same time. One option that I thought I would propose to the group is we currently have our membership is I think it's a state membership, and it's 5 people, and so that will transfer from year to year to the person who's attending the conference, and we usually have one commission member, and then myself, Jenny, and then Michael or Troy, depending upon who's going to which conference. And basically there is another option to increase what we're paying and to go to what's called a council membership. And that council membership is it's roughly only $1,250 more than what we're currently paying. And I thought I would make that suggestion because the virtual council, the virtual conference, NISJIC's virtual conference will be free this year to all members. And that state membership is pretty much unlimited to state councils. So we could actually get everybody on the council to be a member of NISJIC, which I think would be fantastic. And we might not be able to do that annually. Maybe this is a test run for us. Maybe it is something we prioritize in the future, but I think it would be great to have everyone exposed to that community, to work with other councils from other states, and the leadership at the state level. So I wanted to propose that and see what everyone thought about that idea. I'm assuming the NISJIC staff is really wonderful, and they have some, we're going to have to get creative, obviously, because of, it's going to be virtual, but they already have some really wonderful ideas on how to do breakouts. I think it'll be a great opportunity, along with the Esri UC, to have access to a conference that we might not have access to every year for our entire council. So I wanted to bring that up as an opportunity of something we could possibly do.
Aaron, when was that NISJIC meeting again? Did you have a date?
That is, I do believe it's the last week of September. Let me pull that up.
If it's a hassle to pull up, I mean, we can get the info later, but
no,
yeah,
I could pull it.
It sounds interesting.
It'll be at least one day that last week of September. That's correct, Aaron.
Thank you. The 21st to the 25th. I do believe they're trying to keep those same dates. If anybody was dead set on trying to go to New Orleans, they're postponing it to the following year. So they will continue kind of similarly to the way MEGIP had organized their conferences. They're just going to push them back. So yeah, it's the last full week in September, looks like, and it is it's going to be virtual. There'll be more information about that coming soon. But I think it's a really great conference, even if you If you've never attended before, I highly recommend it. Mike Boselman has gone in the past. Lee has gone in the past. I'm trying to think of Ken Wall, of course, has gone many times. Art Pembroke has gone in the past as a local government rep. So we are starting to see more local government representative at these meetings, and I would just highly recommend it. Bill used to be on the board. I'll put you on the spot. You've gone and you certainly have a lot of experience with NISJIC, and I just think that it would be a really great opportunity for the council to have.
Yeah, Aaron, I love your idea of going to the council membership this year so you could get your full council. I know I've seen Jenny a couple times at NISJIC, and you know, when I was a state GIO, it was the most important meeting of the year for me because that's when you're really with your peers. There's really only one state GIS leader per state. So if you want to talk to your peers and compare notes about what things are working, what things are not working, maybe, you know, share you know, what priorities you have, and you find that there's just so much in common from state to state, and there's no need to reinvent the wheel. And plus at NISJIC, you really got your finger on the pulse of what's going on nationally, and it helps you kind of frame the work that's going on in your state to how it fits in even the bigger picture. And so it's for me, it's all very, very constructive and positive.
And then if anyone was interested, we would, you know, as a NISJIC member, we would certainly welcome folks to you know, work on any committee that you're interested in. There's a lot of opportunity to work. I'm working on an initiative called Geo Women to support women in leadership in the geospatial technology industry. We are partnering with other national groups. I also I'm on the board. We're working with strategic planning process for the group as an organization and how we can advance GIS in the nation. Michael leads or co-leads a group for I think it's addressing, or is it Next Gen 911? I can't remember.
Next Gen.
Thanks. and so there's a lot of opportunity to participate. There's a lot of hot topics that come up, and sometimes they come very quickly because we need a quick national response. There's also this community called my.nisjic where there's a lot of discussion forums where you can ask questions to your peers nationally. So highly recommend it.
Like Aaron said, we know already we're going to have some savings in the overall council budget. So I agree. I think this would be a very worthwhile use of those dollars. And really expose all of you to the extent you're interested in what's going on at a national level. So what I would propose is that
Jenny, you're muted.
Yep. What I was going to say, what I would propose here, no objections, is that when we present to you the FY21 MLIA budget for next year, we include cost allocations for some of these things that we've discussed, the transportation strategic review, any update imagery work that would need to happen, possible derived products for the elevation theme, and then leave some flexibility for some council discussion around land cover based on any feedback from the land cover work group. Does that seem reasonable to council members?
Yes, it does. That seems very reasonable. Do you need a motion?
I don't think at this point, Elena, we'll bring that as the budget as an action at your next meeting.
Okay.
Any other questions or discussion from the council?
That sounds good to me.
Thanks, Frank. Wanted to share an update with you on the House Bill 633 study that's being conducted by members of the Legislative Finance Committee and the Education Interim Committee looking at the state library budget. I've been sharing updates with the council for the past year or so about that effort. That subcommittee continues to work. I was a little concerned that with the concerns about the pandemic and potential revenue shortfalls that they might decide that it wasn't worth continuing with the study, but that's not the case. They continue to work hard looking at different funding avenues and continue to just be very supportive of the work of the state library with a strong desire to find ways to fund our work. Two different specific funding channels that they're looking at that I wanted to make the council aware of include looking at an update to the MLIA recordation fee, as well as looking at an appropriation from the state's 911 account. So you're all familiar with the $1 per page recordation fee that's included in Montana's Recordation Act, specifically for MLIA. Again, 75 cents of that goes to the Montana Land Information account and 25 cents stays with the county where those fees are collected. There is draft legislation now that would propose doubling that recordation fee to $2 per page. They would keep the same proportional split between the state and the counties. So the MLIA share would be $1.50 a page. County share would be 50 cents per page. The subcommittee did unanimously agree to move that draft legislation forward to the full Legislative Finance Committee. So the Finance Committee will be asked to take action on that proposal at their August meeting. We don't yet have a date for that August meeting, but I understand it's going to be in early August. So representatives from the Clerks and Recorders Association did attend the meeting of the subcommittee a couple weeks ago. They spoke in support of increasing that recordation fee. They said they understood the need for the state library to have that increased funding, and also made the subcommittee aware that should they decide to open up this statute, clerks and recorders might also seek to increase the overall fees that are included in that larger recordation statute. Right now, I think the total fees, I believe it's $8 per page, $1 of which is MLIA, $7 goes to cover other services like records management and other needs of the clerks and recorders. That amount hasn't been increased. I can't remember the exact time period, but I think longer ago than the MLIA dollars. So they said that they would be supportive of opening up that legislation and would hope to be able to partner with us on increasing the overall recordation fees. And I think having their support as one of the key stakeholders for that legislation is really valuable. And then, as I mentioned, the other source of funding they're looking at is the 911 account. That's the fees that are collected on our telephone charges to support 911. There are federal requirements that the state has to follow for how 911 dollars are used, and GIS is one of those allowable expenses. The state has a next generation 911 strategic plan and are continuing to try to make efforts to move towards a next generation 911 model. And we've argued to the subcommittee that it makes sense for the state library to be funded at least in part by those dollars. And again, it sounds like there's good committee support for that idea. I expect that the subcommittee will take action to look at some possible draft legislation at a meeting in August as well. So depending on their action and the action of the Legislative Finance Committee, I would anticipate that both of those pieces of legislation would be introduced in the 2021 legislative session. And then finally, they're looking at a couple of other different sources of revenue, one of which would expand the current state agency allocation that is used to fund NRIS and the Natural Heritage Program. Right now, there's 4 state agencies and the university system that they provide pass-through dollars to the state library to fund those services. And there's discussion amongst the subcommittee to create a different model that would have a state agency allocation across most, if not all, state agencies. And that work is not as well defined at this point, but is still in ongoing discussion. So big picture, lots of continued support for the state library and a strong desire to provide increased stable funding for the work that we're doing. Any questions there? We'll continue to keep the council up to date. I expect that most of these details will be ironed out in August and September, and then we'll know what channels they might move forward. And at that point, there will be opportunity for us to talk about how we can advocate for that funding through the various groups you represent.
I would just like to add that I listened to the recording, and I thought that it was the most positive talk about funding the library and the support for the library, and some of the legislators just kept hitting home, this is to support the library, and I was kind of like happily surprised. And so I think that it's definitely a positive thing to listen to and to hear the support. The other thing is that, you know, I've been actively working with the clerks and recorders for those that are working on the elections, you know, with the geo-enabled elections efforts. And then we have two folks who are grant recipients that are working on a pilot project and partnering with the state library for geo-enabled elections. So I have had, you know, the opportunity to work with them, and will continue to work with them. But I think it's very positive to show the GIS work that's needed, not only, you know, at the state level, but you know, also for this new and upcoming initiative, something that will be very new to most local governments. So I think that there's a very obvious tie there that will benefit both groups.
Thanks, Erin. Well, I'm very happy to have Bill Johnson from AppGeo with us to talk about the strategic planning process. Erin, do you want to introduce the contracting mechanism that we're going through to be able to engage with AppGeo? Again, this is one of the council priorities in previous land plans to go through this strategic planning process. So we're really glad to be able to get that ball rolling.
Absolutely. So there is a contracting mechanism, and it's the NASPO Value Point Agreement that I worked with the state of Utah to kind of understand how they were able to use this contract to help them with their strategic planning process. And essentially, there are many businesses that have been vetted through this this contracting mechanism, and basically sought advice from the state of Utah and some of the things that they have just gone through with their strategic planning process. And I thought it was an avenue that was really great to take advantage of. And essentially, it makes it easier to do contracting with pre-vetted vendors. And AppGeo is the organization that Bill Johnson is representing, and have done strategic planning in the past, has recently conducted an exercise with the state of Utah and many other places. And so I thought it would be it was a good opportunity, given that we were already prioritizing the process under this current coming fiscal year. So that's how we came upon that. Plus a lot of the, I guess we discovered it with a lot more of the contract work that I've been doing in partnership with ITSD on the ELA contracts. So just kind of new things that I've learned to help benefit the state in regards to GIS and more specifically with the strategic planning process. So if you have questions on that, I can certainly point you to the websites and some of the contract pages that are out there and available for, I don't know if it's available to local governments. I certainly can work with our contracting people at ITSD to see if that is the case, but it's definitely a very valuable tool to use.
All right, Bill.
All right. Well, thank you very much. I just want to say right away how much I've been enjoying this council meeting, hearing so many interesting things, and just it's all great. And I particularly like the fact that Montana's council is housed at the state library. I don't know of another state where that's the case, and it seems to me to be a very, very good home for, you know, a state GIS program. And and it seems to be working quite well. I'm just delighted with the level of engagement and the topics you're covering and the depth of things. So it's all really, really good. So as I mentioned at the beginning, I spent 31 years of my career at the state of New York and was involved in all the state coordination work from its beginnings quite a long time ago now. And we set up a council and all that. And one of the most important things a state council can do is strategic planning. And I really, I put this at the top of the list because what a strategic plan does is it really lays out your priorities. It sets that North Star that guides the work that the council is doing. And once you have a strategic plan in place, it's very easy then to kind of filter out the things that are distractions that don't align with your strategic plan that you really need to set aside because they're barriers to success on achieving your strategy, and it helps you stay focused on breaking down the pieces of work that might happen in work groups or committees and things to help you make progress toward those overarching goals that are identified in your strategic plan. So it's really, really important work. FGO as a company has done a lot of these. There was a program funded with grants from the Federal Geographic Data Committee. Actually, they're more than a decade ago now. There was what they call the Cooperative Agreements Program, the CAP grants. They were matching funds so that the FGDC would put up half the money and the state would contribute the other half. And for a period of 6 or 7 years, one of the categories of funding was specifically targeted to doing these state GIS strategic plans. And a lot of states had not done one prior to FGDC setting up that program. And actually AppGeo won the initial contract and developed the template that was used as part of the program. And then we did the strategic plans for about 30 states under that program. So we have a lot of experience doing these, and it's a really it's a fun, if you do them right, they're rewarding, but they're also fun. You're going to get to know some people better. You're going to it really engages the community in an important way. So I really think that there are two main benefits of doing a strategic plan. One is, the content that you're going to develop. You're going to be putting on paper, your priorities and kind of and sharing that with the world and telling the world this is what we're going to focus on. This is the why for what the council does is embodied in that strategic plan. So that content is really, really important. And that's what you're probably going to think about first with your strategic plan. But there's another benefit that I think is equally important. And that is the level of engagement that happens across your community of stakeholders in the process of doing this strategic plan. Because what you really want is for everyone in your broad community of GIS people across Montana to feel like they're part of this, that they can see themselves in it. They can see the things that matter to them in it, that it's not just some state people, off in Helena that don't get it, foisting another bureaucratic thing on us. That it's, you want everybody to feel some ownership in this thing. And so the way that happens generally in these strategic plans is you're going to have several different mechanisms to engage your community. So you're going to start with engagement at the council level. The council you can think of as your steering committee for the strategic plan, but you're also going to want to do things like develop some sort of a survey instrument to gather input from your users, and then generally there's a series of workshops that are done in person. Now, given the COVID-19 situation, those are going to have to necessarily flip to a virtual format, which in some ways is a little unfortunate, because that kind of in-person interaction, I think, is a great way to kind of break through the ice a little bit and get to know people better and develop some empathy for some of the other positions that you hear about and all of that. So, but what I'm getting at is you're going to have multiple ways for people to be part of this. And, both on the kind of the intake side for ideas, and then also to vet and refine these ideas as you bring them. There's a process to sift these and to convert them to higher level goals. And part of the way you get there is doing something called a SWOT analysis, SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And you're basically identifying the conditions and the context for things that are happening in Montana. And as a result of going through that SWOT analysis, a lot of issues are going to surface, and they'll generate a lot of discussion. And what's really healthy as part of this is for there to be debate. It's actually not good for everybody to agree. It's better for there to be opposing voices and counterpoints and a vigorous debate, because that's how you develop a stronger consensus and a more equitable solution to these things is through that kind of debate process. At the end of it, you're going to have a strategic plan that lays out at a very high level your major objectives for your program. And then generally what follows a strategic plan are a series of business plans where you, for an individual priority, you can develop a business plan that gives you, a how-to to get to that objective. For example, you might identify, and I'm making this up here, but you might identify as one of your highest priorities that you want to improve the discoverability and sharing of GIS resources. And you might be thinking more broadly than just sharing data. It might be about sharing, REST endpoints to web services, or catalogs, or APIs, tools, and templates, and maybe even some training programs. Just the body of things that can be reused and mined for greater value. So having that as a strategic priority would be fine, but then how do you do that? So that a business plan would then break that down to, okay, so we need to work on web tools where we can have these things discoverable, and we ought to have, maybe we need to be looking at how can we combine small amounts of budgeting to deliver a training program more efficiently and open to more people, and all these things that you could break apart in a business plan. So that's where we're heading with this thing. I think these are really great projects to get involved with. I'm really looking forward to being able to help on this, and I guess at this point, if there's any questions or discussion, be happy to entertain that.
I just want to say I'm really grateful that we have the opportunity to partner with you, Bill and AppGeo. I think oftentimes it can be really, really beneficial to have someone outside of our specific community of practice to guide the process. It's often so hard to have that heads up view when you're deep in the needs and the processes on a day-to-day basis. And so I think this is going to be a really great opportunity for us in the council and the rest of the state. You know, we've talked about some specific needs, and there's some priorities in our current FY21 land plan, really looking in a strategic way at what the Montana spatial data infrastructure is, what it means to be a theme, especially as we're seeing integration of more and more themes, looking strategically about who the stakeholders are for the themes, you know, the processes by which we collect that data and share that data up to the state, to the feds. And I really look forward to the opportunity to help address some of those priorities that are currently identified in the land plan as we go through the strategic planning process.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. Looking forward to it.
Any other questions from the council for Bill? So I wanted to talk just a little bit about sort of how we view the process going forward. We sort of have two parallel efforts as we launch into the strategic planning process. Of course, that will be going on as we're thinking about creating the FY22 land plan. And the strategic planning work, of course, won't be done in time to inform the next land plan, but it should be available for the following land plan. We always have a land plan subcommittee, and what I would propose is that that subcommittee also serve as the steering committee that works most directly with AppGeo on the strategic planning process, and then brings that information and process back to the larger council. We'll do our best to kind of coordinate the efforts of creating the upcoming land plan, but really use that process to really launch the strategic planning process and support that effort going forward. How does that sound to folks?
I think Frank would be interested. Yes, that sounds good.
Excellent, Frank.
I'll stay on the subcommittee too.
Thanks, Valentine. Any further discussion, comments, or anyone else interested in volunteering at this point?
This is Lee. I think I would be willing to stay on the committee.
Excellent. We're going to want to make sure we have representation from the grant subcommittee as well.
I'll volunteer Mike, especially since he's not here. I feel like he'd do the same for me.
Any questions for Bill about the process going forward?
Where is
This is Janet. I just have one question, is how Bill or the council sees our involvement in, I mean, what role will the council play as we move through this strategic planning?
Yeah, you'll definitely be involved. The way these generally work is that the council is like the top tier group of stakeholders that are engaged with throughout the process. And then there's outreach to the broader community as part of the process, but the council members will be the ones that will be dealing with every step of the way with the team as we go through the whole plan development.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think too, this is an opportunity for us to involve MAGIP and the MAGIP board in that work as well. So Jenny, maybe we'll coordinate with you and Mike on who from Maggot might participate in that process as well.
All right.
All right. Thanks, Bill. Looking forward to
welcome.
working with you.
Yeah, thank you.
The last item under new business are the FY21 Land Plan Council priorities. We've hit on them a couple of times already. Looking quickly at priority 2 and the evaluation of the grant program and the creation of those benchmarks. As Erin said, the grant subcommittee will be meeting later this summer to talk about those benchmarks. And to the extent that they're ready to do so, may have some information to present to the council at your September meeting. And I hope with regard to priority 1, looking at the MSDI, that we can really lean into the strategic planning process to help us address some of the questions that we've identified in the land plan, looking specifically at the overall structure of the MSDI going forward. I think that, coupled with a strategic review of the transportation theme, should give the council some good information and perhaps not only some business plans, but some processes around which we can evaluate the future of MSDI. So I think we have a kind of a roadmap laid out for us that will really move us forward on these 2 council priorities. Any other council opportunities that folks see? That covers the agenda items for the meeting. Is there any public comment? Any other business from the council?
I guess we could explain Zoom and why we're doing the waiting room. Jenny, if we want to talk about that. I had someone say, hey, I was in the meeting, but they didn't identify themselves. So I think they eventually dropped out because I put them back in the waiting room. But what we've been experiencing, and other people may be aware of this, but there's been some new processes or methodologies in place for conducting Zoom or other types of virtual meetings because of something called Zoom bombing. And what they're seeing on a national level is hackers coming in and disrupting public meetings. So that's why we've had to implement the waiting room. And so if we don't recognize your username, we might just say, hey, please identify yourself, so that we don't have, we aren't subject to that, to what other, I don't even know what groups have been, but it was something that came quite quickly in the beginning of this in regards to public meetings and disruptions being caused by hackers.
So this is Janet. So Erin, to that, there's the waiting room, and then there's 2 other things that we do now in my other Zoom meetings. One is that once everyone's there, I don't know if you can do this, you lock the meeting. That's on the security tab. And then the other thing is that you never use a standard password. You always do one that's generated randomly for each meeting. So those are the 3 things that seem to work: the waiting room, the locking the meeting, and the password choice. Those 3 things are preventing the Zoom bombing from occurring.
Okay, I don't think I did the random generated
Yeah.
password, but we definitely can do that for future meetings.
Mm-hmm.
I guess as it's looking now, Jenny, it looks like probably a virtual meeting for September as well.
So, and just a reminder that that date is September 16th for that meeting.
The one piece of technology that I have not explored yet, but we will with some NISJIC groups that I'm a part of is breaking people out into workrooms within a Zoom call, and that is something we could possibly do in the future for separate discussions after our official meeting, especially in regards to subcommittee meetings or the strategic planning process, that we could take people and break them out into different rooms. It's just another piece of the technology that we could utilize to support the council.
Any other business? Hearing none, I'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting. And if you want to stop the recording, we'll hang out for just another minute. Thanks, everyone. Appreciate your participation.